Good morning, folks. It is September the 10th, 2020, and this morning we're going to talk about allegory, avatars, and the culture wars being engaged in by the current cancel culture. You know, human beings are social creatures, and this is how we evolved socially. So when we conceive of something, we tend to personify it. We personify our conceptions. When human beings were awakening to themselves, to self-realization, at that distant point in our ancestors' past, they awakened in a way that gave them the ability to imagine themselves in different scenarios, create an avatar of themselves, and send themselves into that scenario to see what the possible outcomes would be. Because, of course, human beings are averse to danger. And it is better to be able to imagine yourself in a situation and imagine all the things that could go wrong and kill off the avatars of our imagination than to actually put ourselves in harm's way and end up killing ourselves as a result of not fully appreciating where the problems in that situation could lead to our, being our demise perhaps, or being injured. I teach total quality. And one of the main documents that we use in total quality is called a failure and effects mode analysis, where we look at a process. We do a map of the process flow mapping is what it's called. And at each step in the process, we determine all the things that could go wrong with producing that product or in servicing a product. And in those steps, we assign corrective actions in the form of job instructions. They're called a control plan. It's called a control plan that gives people information that they need to avoid those potential pitfalls and produce a product free of defects or produce a service free of defects. And this is essentially the entire purpose of mankind waking up. We could imagine scenarios that would harm us. And we could create avatars. Instead of killing ourselves, we'd send our avatar in to die or live depending on how effective our planning was. And the avatars that we've created throughout our history tell stories about human nature. Those stories are eternal. They're the stories that have lasted over time. That's why the Bible has withstood the test of time. That's why Greek mythology has stood the test of time. And I've become to feel a bit like Cassandra in Greek mythology. The gods blessed her with the gift of prophecy, and because she refused the advances of the gods, they also cursed her with the fact that no one would believe her. She would prophesy what was about to happen, but no one would listen. And, it's an awful situation to be in. I woke up, particularly in Norway, by about 2014. I became convinced that this culture war was concerted, that there was a plan behind it, and that there was a very deliberate reason for the decay of all the foundational principles upon which Western culture rests. Of course, Nietzsche predicted this in the 1800s. And he said that the blood from the death of God would be insufficient to wash away the damage from the fact that we had killed God. And of course, God, in an allegorical sense, was an avatar that we had created of the perfect being, of perfection. Because human beings, being social creatures, can only conceive of things socially. They personify, we, as a species, we personify everything. We even give, inanimate objects names if they have sufficient importance to us, because it's the only way that we can relate to one another. In the Christian sense, Christ personified the perfect human being. He was the goal to which, under Christianity, Christian man, would try to emulate. And with the rejection of all the grand narratives that went behind the Christian story, emerged the need to have an alternative to Christ. And of course, Nietzsche was the one that postulated what that alternative might be, and in his mind, it was creating the Übermensch, the person that was only driven by their innate desires, their animal instincts. We see today this peculiar tearing down of everything that at one time gave our life meaning. And in the nihilism that results from it, there's nothing but destruction, violence, anger, and of course now this incredible divide that we see. I have family members who no longer speak with me. I'm sure many of you do as well. I have many colleagues from my past life in music who won't speak with me because, of my classical liberal views and my belief in the sovereign person and the person that should be free to pursue their own self-interest without the interference of the state. But in the radical left's desire to create the Übermensch, the one thing that has died is the belief in that individual, in our individual need to pursue meaning, to better ourselves, to better our loved ones, to better our community. Because it begins, of course, with ourselves. This is the beginning point. The understanding that we are accountable to God, to ourselves, to our community, to our family, of course. And this has been replaced in this Übermenschian idea that the collective now replaces the divine, and that we're really not individuals any longer, that we're merely an extension of our ethnicity, our sexual orientation, our belief systems, our social group, that we're just an avatar for some bizarre, inhuman perversion of human nature. I suppose if there's anything that I have to say today, it's the fact that nothing can survive, nothing can be successful if it defies reality. The world is a dangerous place, but the government can't keep you safe. Your own self-awareness and your own behaving responsibly is the only thing that will protect you in this dangerous age when nihilistic, envious, and ill-meaning people are trying to tear apart everything that has brought us this far. Of course, our culture has warts. But where? Where is it better? And this ridiculous Black Lives Matter movement coming to Canada, I mean, the first, and I've said this many times in previous videos, Lieutenant Governor Simcoe, when he declared the nature of the government that he was about to form in the 1790s, at the very beginning of of Canada West, of Upper Canada at that time, he said that I will have natives of Africa, North America, and Europe treated identically under English common law. There can only be prejudice if it's legal, if it's entrenched in the law. If the law has regard for one man above another, then you can say that there's systemic prejudice. But if the law refuses all such prejudice, which is why when legal judgments are made and why when legal letters are drafted, they include the phrase without prejudice, meaning the only thing that was considered in the drafting of the document or making of the judgment was the law. Lady Justice must be blind. This is the reason for the culture war today. Instead of being blind, she's accusing people, or rather, she's had her blinders torn off, and the law now implies that there's systemic racism when there can be none under the previous law that existed. Now, people will always be prejudiced, which is why we have the law. We all have prejudices, most of all, those who claim that they have none, proven by the fact that they will no longer speak with me. I haven't stopped speaking with them. They can't even talk to me without reprimanding me for daring to believe in the sovereign individual and my Christian faith. Think about that. Families are being separated today. Children are no longer talking to their parents. This is happening right in this household. My stepdaughter won't speak with her mother because my wife warned her daughter that she's being lost to the great collective and that she needs to fully understand who she is as an individual and develop her own unique talents, which are many. This young person has been gifted with intelligence and beauty and wit such that, anyway, it blows my mind. We are living in an extremely dangerous age. Because I teach problem solving, I have to keep warning, in spite of being so Cassandra-like in nature, that I know that no one's listening. And what's happened after all these months of shutdown and Trudeau's ridiculous spending blitz and his government's constant contradiction over what should be done to face this crisis with the CCP virus and deal with China. And now look at Victoria in Australia, where I also have family who don't talk to me. The Premier of Victoria has become a titular oligarch, virtually shutting down society, arresting pregnant women for daring to express their concerns on Facebook. Freedom of discourse, freedom of speech, freedom of gathering, freedom to worship how we choose. These are not rights given to us by the state, and the state has no right to suspend them. These are God-given inherent rights. They're the right of human nature to pursue our own self-interest and welfare and the betterment of our fellows as individuals cooperating voluntarily, not under the coercion of the great socialist collective. And I'm seeing manifested in the alt-right the same sort of lunacy. I corrected a fellow the other day who posted a video from a physician who is also a state senator in the Midwest U.S., sharing his thoughts about the virus. And it stated in the video that the gentleman was Canadian. And I corrected the fellow and I said, no, this chap is an American senator and a physician in the Midwest. And the guy called me on FaceTime to call me a fat fuck and of accusing me of trying to argue with a fellow patriot, whatever the hell that means. I didn't know Canadians were patriots. You know, these words have odd connotations to a Canuck. I'm not a flag-waving, my country right or wrong, I love America kind of guy. I don't love anything unless it has to do with you and me being absolutely at liberty to live our own lives and have the government out of it. Patriot. This is an age of absolute lunacy. Absolute lunacy. There's not a reasonable, cautious, thoughtful voice out there other than Max Bernier, perhaps. I was down at the protest the other week, and there was over 5,000 of us on Parliament Hill demanding that our inherent rights be recognized. And from the podium, they said these rights aren't given to us by the state, and the state has no right to take them away from us. And we exercised our rights that day. People from all different walks of life, a lot of Quebecois were there. I was heartened by their awakening to the fact that this current crisis that we're in, this culture war, is coming from the highest authorities in the land. Our own Prime Minister, with the absolute decay of separation of powers. The executive, the legislature, and the judiciary are no longer acting as a system of checks and balances. The courts have become corrupted. Our Attorney General was just accused of breaking the law and interfering with the judiciary. These are serious charges. If you know anything about the Westminster parliamentary system and English common law, these things should send chills down your spine because they are reprehensible and they are unconstitutional and they're absolutely illegal. And yet the government passes legislation after legislation that contradicts previous law. With that, I'll leave you. I've shared my concerns. I hope you can listen. I hope we can start a discussion that's reasonable, calm, circumspect, and imagine what will happen, the outcome of allowing this decay of the freest, most liberal, and most democratic country on the face of the planet. With that, I wish you a fine day. You take good care. Think.